What is up, gang? Today is day 17 of Press Record 30. Today I want to talk about the history of happiness. Happiness is a term that people have been using since the beginning of time to describe the end at which life should aim. You could say, in a way, happiness has been man's chief concern since the beginning. In what's widely regarded as the first textbook of the Western world, history text in the Western world, it's written by this guy named Herodotus around 430 BC. In the beginning of the Histories is Herodotus's telling of the remarkable feats of man, sort of men of renown in the ancient Greek world. And the Herodotus's Histories is a blend of both fact and fiction to sort of tell of the legends of Greek from sort of the golden age. But in the beginning of the Histories, Herodotus, in book 1, Herodotus tells this story of Solon. Solon was one of the ancient Greek sages known for his wisdom in the ancient Greek world. And Herodotus tells the story of Solon being called to the land of a king called Creusus or Croesus. And Croesus is the king who has he's fabulously wealthy. He has everything material you could ever wish for, more gold than he knows what to do with. He calls Solon to his court because Solon was known for his travels and for being everywhere in the world. And he asks Solon, effectively, have you met anybody in the world who you would consider the happiest person? So we learn here that Croesus is concerned with happiness. He wants to be known as the happiest person. If there's anybody that Solon would regard as happier, now is the time for Solon to speak up. And he does, and I'm going to read what happens here. So Solon, having left his native country for this reason and for the sake of seeing various lands, came to Amasis in Egypt and also to Croesus at Sardis. Having there arrived, he was entertained as a guest by Croesus in the king's palace. And afterwards, on the third or fourth day, at the bidding of Croesus, his servants led Solon round to see his treasures. And they showed him all things, how great and magnificent they were. And after he had looked upon them all and examined them as he had occasion, Croesus asked Solon as follows. Athenian guest, much report of thee has come to us, both in regard to thy wisdom and thy wanderings. How that in thy search for wisdom thou hast traversed many lands to see them. Now therefore a desire has come upon me to ask thee whether thou hast seen any whom thou deemest to be of all men the most happy. This he asked, meaning Croesus, supposing that he himself was the happiest of men. But Solon, using no flattery, but truth only, said, Yes, O king, Telos the Athenian. And Croesus, marveling at that which he said, asked him earnestly, In what respect dost thou judge Telos to be the most happy? And he said, Telos in the first place, living while his native state was prosperous, had sons fair and good, and saw all of them children begotten and living to grow up. From all of them children begotten and living to grow up. And secondly, he had with what us is accounted wealth, and after his life a most glorious end. For when battle was fought by the Athenians at Eleusis against the neighboring people, he brought up supports and routed the foe, and there died by a most fair death. And the Athenians buried him publicly where he fell, and honored him greatly. So when Solon had moved Croesus to inquire further by the story of Telos, recounted how many points of happiness he had, the king asked again who he had seen proper to be placed next after this man, supposing, once again, that he himself would certainly obtain at least second place. But Solon replied, Now we learn not only is Croesus not the happiest person Solon's ever met or seen, he's neither the second nor the third happiest person. Those spots are reserved for two brothers by the names of Cleobus and Biton. Solon responds, Cleobus and Biton, for these who were of Argos by race, possessed a sufficiency of wealth, and in addition to this, strength of body, such as I shall tell. Both equally won prizes in the games, and moreover the following tale is told of them. There was a feast of Hera among the Argives, and it was by all means necessary that their mother should be borne in a car to the temple. But since their oxen were not brought up in time from the field, the young man, barred from all else by lack of time, submitted themselves to the yoke and drew the wain, their mother being borne by them upon it. So these two guys, pause. These two guys, they need to take their mother to this festival because the oxen weren't big enough or strong enough to do it. So they are effectively putting themselves in the place of an oxen. Not exactly what you would call the most envious of positions. On pause. And so they brought it on for 45 furlongs and came to the temple. Then after they had done this and had been seen by the assembled crowd, there came to their life a most excellent ending. And in this the deity declared that it was better for man to die than continue to live. For the Argive men were standing round and extolling strength of young men, while the Argive women were extolling the mother to whose lot it had fallen to have such sons. And the mother, being exceedingly rejoiced both by the deed itself and by the report made of it, took her stand in front of the image of the goddess and prayed that she would give to Cleobis and Biton, her sons, who had honored her greatly, the gift which is best for men to receive. And after this prayer, when they had sacrificed and feasted, the young men laid down to sleep within the temple itself, and never rose again, but were held bound in this last end. And the Argives made statues in the likeness of them, and dedicated them as offerings at Delphi, thinking that they had proved themselves most excellent. Thus Solon assigned the second place in respect of happiness to these, and Croesus was moved to anger and said, Athenian guest, hast thou then so cast aside our prosperous state as worth nothing, that thou dost prefer to us even men of private station? And he said, Croesus, this is Solon speaking, thou art inquiring about human fortunes of one who well knows that a deity is altogether envious and apt to disturb our lot. For in the course of a long time a man may say things which he does not desire to see, and suffer also many things which he would not desire to suffer. The limit of life for a man I laid down at 70 years, and these 70 years give 25,200 days, not reckoning for any intercalated month. Then, if every one of these years shall be made any longer by 1 month, that the seasons may be caused to come round due at the end of the time of year, and of these, so will be in number 5 and 30 besides the 70 years. And of these months, the days will be 1,050. Of all these days, being in number 26,250, which go to the 70 years, one day produces nothing at all which resembles what another brings to it. This is his point. A lot of numbers there. Thus then, O Croesus, man is altogether a creature of accident. As for thee, I perceive that thou art both great in wealth and king of many men. But that which thou didst ask me, I cannot call thee yet. So what Solon is saying here, you asked me who the happiest of men is. Yes, you're wealthy, and you're a king of many men, but that doesn't make you a happy person. That which thou did ask me, I cannot call thee yet. I cannot call you happy yet. Until I learn that thou hast brought thy life to a fair ending. For a very rich man is not at all to be accounted more happy than he who has but subsistence from day to day, unless also the fortune go with him of ending his life well in possessions of things fair. For many wealthy men are not happy, while many who have but a moderate living are fortunate. And in truth, the very rich man who is not happy has two advantages only as compared with the poor man who is fortunate, whereas the latter has many as compared with the rich man who is not happy. So I'm going to pause there. So in this ancient story, we see an example of something we still struggle with today, especially when we think about the word happiness. Often when we think about that word happiness today, we associate it with sort of the fleeting momentary pleasures of life, that cheap hit of dopamine that comes when we eat something pleasurable or sweet to the tooth, or we partake in something worldly that gives us a flash or a feeling of fleshly delight. That is different than the ancient Greek conception of happiness that Herodotus is introducing through Solon and the ancient Greek philosophers here, which has something to do more with a life well lived. Happiness referring to a life well lived. Aristotle in his Nicomachean Ethics further fleshes out this idea and uses the word eudaimonia. It's often translated as happiness, but it means something more like living aligned with the Spirit. There is a spiritual component to happiness, what I would refer to as capital H happiness. Capital H happiness is what the founders of the U.S. Constitution used in the Declaration of Independence when they said life, liberty, and the pursuit of, look it up, capital H happiness. This is separate and distinct from those moments of momentary pleasure. When we identify happiness as the end at which all things aim and ought to aim, my case in the ancient Greek conception of the world, which starts with Herodotus and Solon and moves to Aristotle, is a conception that means something more like a life well lived, or as Aristotle would define it, happiness is a virtuous activity of the soul. This is a very old, dueling definition of happiness that has been around as long as man has been. And if there's one thing I can help convince people of, it is to pour more into the second type, chasing the second type of happiness, which has to do with the flourishing life, the flourishing of the soul, and happiness experienced as a side effect or byproduct of pursuing excellence, pursuing magnanimity, largest of soul, through virtue and good actions and right hearts and good thoughts. That's enough for today's video. Peace.